Cool. So now if you're watching the recording, I did just pray, so we're covered with that. Like I said, my name is Marilyn Klein. My husband and I have been married for 10 years. We just celebrated our 10th anniversary this week, actually, so kind of a big deal. Thank you. Yeah, you can bring me all the gifts during lunch. We have 4 children here on earth, and we have 1 baby in heaven. And my oldest daughter is 9. I have a 9-year-old, 7-year-old, 5-year-old, and 3.5-year-old. And so I'm kind of in the thick of this like young moms thing with you, although I don't currently have anyone in diapers, so I kind of feel like it's cheating almost. But it is kind of nice. And we started this retreat just because I know like the Catholic Church, like we ask people to use NFP, we ask people to be open to life. And then sometimes it's really hard when you're doing those things to have the time to get away and to spend time with the Lord. So we just really wanted this to be an accessible day. So along with that, I hope that you feel comfortable to do whatever you need. So if you need to take some extra time to rest, or if you're really craving like some social interaction, I hope that you feel free to do the things that are rejuvenating and refreshing to you. Okay, so a few months ago, the gospel reading was the reading of the weeds and the wheat. And after I heard it, I was like, oh, this is going to be, like, I really want this to be part of the talk for the Young Moms Retreat, because I feel like it's a really good analogy for the experience of motherhood. And so I'm going to go ahead and just start with that and then talk a little bit about that. So this is from Matthew chapter 13. I forgot my Bible this morning, but thankfully we have phones. So Matthew chapter 13, verses 24 through 30, the parable of the weeds among the wheat. He proposed another parable to them. The kingdom of heaven may be likened to a man who sowed good seed in his field. While everyone was asleep, his enemy came and sowed weeds all through the wheat and then went off. When the crop grew and bore fruit, the weeds appeared as well. The slaves of the householder came to him and said, "Master, did you not sow good seed in your field? Where have the weeds come from?" He answered, "An enemy has done this." His slaves said to him, "Do you want us to go and pull them up?" He replied, "No, if you pull up the weeds, you might uproot the wheat along with them. Let them grow together until the harvest. And then at the harvest time, I will say to the harvesters, 'First collect the weeds and tie them into bundles for burning, but gather the wheat into my barn.'" And so I was really struck by this idea, this visual of like weeds and wheat growing together, because I feel like that's a good analogy for motherhood. Like we have like these really beautiful moments of like, oh, everyone's getting along and our kids are playing nicely. And then like 30 minutes later, it's bedtime and you're like, just go to sleep. I don't care. I don't care about your stuffed animal. I don't care about I don't care, and you're like, wow, that things changed quickly there, didn't they? So I was telling my husband about this. I was like, I think it's just like a really good analogy for motherhood. He's a civil engineer, and he was like, I'm just wondering, like, who is the enemy that is sowing the weeds? And do you really want to burn things? And I was like, no, it's an analogy, Mitch. It's an analogy. It doesn't have to be perfect here. So if there's any engineers here today, bear with me, I guess, and maybe not as literal of a thinker. But I think motherhood in a lot of ways is about like holding these two seemingly contradictory things, or like the positives and negatives in tension at the same time. Like, we all have these moments where like, you're like, oh, like this baby, like I could just watch them sleep forever. And then it's like 3:00 in the morning and you're like, please sleep, like, please sleep. I want my house to be peaceful. And now I'm yelling at everybody. You really see like the highest highs in your spouse and in your children, and you see the lowest lows, and you see the ways that in yourself too. I think motherhood really brings out the reality of where we are as people. Like I used to think I was a really patient person, and then I had children and I was like, well, got some growth to do there. And I also think that there's like an aspect of motherhood that's like looking to the long term. Like I can visualize like my family at Thanksgiving in, 10, 15 years. And there's like this tension of like, oh, that's going to be so beautiful. And there's like a goodness that I'm working towards with like, okay, if I want my family to look like that in 10 to 15 years, I need to be willing to like put in the work now of changing diapers and listening to the most ridiculous stories about things I don't care about, and looking at rocks for 6 hours a day, and sticks, so many sticks. I'm like 98% sure that's a universal child truth of like, you go on a walk, you return with 12 sticks. And why? Nobody knows why, except other children, because they're like, that's a nice stick. Okay. So I think there's this question of like, how do we live in this unknown, like with the weeds and the wheat, and how do we work through this process? And I think it's not something that's exclusive to parenthood. I think that everybody goes through that, but I do think it's like sort of magnified in parenthood because you have this idea of like, my kids are going to grow up and my life is going to continue to change. And there's so many different things with that. So I was like going to write about this, and then I like wrote in my prayer journal, like, I feel like a hypocrite talking about this because this is so hard for me too. I think it's really hard to not know. And I think it's really hard to hold both things in tension and to hold both things together. And so like, I feel like I was just sort of musing on this because I've been giving away a bunch of my baby stuff, because our youngest is 3.5. And then the other day I was at Target and I saw these maternity shorts that were on sale, and I was like, I mean, just in case, right? And so we've got like this tension that I think is intrinsic to motherhood. Okay, so we've got the weeds and the wheat. And then I did want to jump over to a John Paul II quote, since it is his feast day today. So there's a John Paul II quote that says, do not be afraid when love requires sacrifice. And I used to have this as the background on my phone. I changed it to the background on my phone when I found out I was pregnant with my fourth daughter, when my third daughter was 7 months old. And I was like, ooh, this is a little intense here. And I just kind of needed that reminder because I was really afraid, and there were a lot of things that I was really uncertain about in that phase of my life. And I think there's a lot of sacrifices in motherhood. I probably don't need to tell anybody that. I think we all have a pretty reasonable understanding of that. But, just in case you have forgotten, maybe we'll do a quick little recap. First of all, you sacrifice your body in motherhood. You house a person for 9 months. Then you birth that person, which is kind of a big deal. You feed that person and you raise them. You sacrifice your sleep for a long time, it feels like. You sacrifice your patience, and sometimes you feel like you're sacrificing your sanity because you have conversations with your kids that really are not, like, you're like, did I really just have to tell you not to lick the aquarium at the zoo? I did just have to, those words just came out of my mouth. Mitch and I have like a list of things that I never thought I would have to say to somebody. His favorite one is, we don't throw dogs. My son this week switched pant sizes, and he was really upset about it. And he told me that he wouldn't be able to run at PE because his pants were too long. And then like his trump card was, my ankles are going to be so hot. It's just like, sometimes I'm like, I have a college degree and I'm arguing with you about how hot your ankles are going to be when you wear pants that fit you correctly. Here we are. Your humility is a sacrifice in motherhood. I really felt this one time when I was carrying one of my children out from Mass, and they were throwing a huge fit, wearing boots. We're big fans of rain boots in our family. Wearing rain boots, they were kicking, I don't even remember which kid it was, kicking so hard that rain boots were like flying into the pews. Thank goodness there was only 2 of them, but it was really embarrassing. I like had to retrieve the rain boots after Mass from other families. So, but I think the biggest sacrifice that we have to make as mothers, as parents, is the sacrifice of control. And I don't know if you are like this, but I really like control. I really like thinking that I'm in control. I really like the perception of being in control. And I feel like motherhood has shown me in a lot of ways how little control I have. I can't control my kids' behavior, which is really frustrating sometimes because I'm like, well, if I was a better mom, then they would never fight with each other and they would never blah, blah, blah. And then at some point, one of my friends was like, are you the person punching them? And I was like, no, of course not. She was like, well, like, then it's not really your issue because you're not the person who's like hurting the other. And I was like, oh, you're right. Like, I can't physically be like controlling your body, right? So I can't control my kids' behavior. I can't force my kids to love each other. Some of you maybe just have little kids, and some of you maybe have older kids. And I feel like the older my kids get, the more I'm like, the sibling dynamic comes into play. And I'm just like, maybe just be nice to each other. Like, I'm not asking you to like, go out of your way to like cook breakfast in bed for your sibling, but maybe just don't like elbow them when you're walking by, I can't force my kids to have a relationship with Jesus, which I think is like a sort of like a for every mom everywhere, right? Of like, you can raise your kids in the faith and then they make their own decisions. And that's kind of a tough thing to think about. Another thing is like the sacrifice of control of your fertility, right? We all know people, or maybe we are the people who have kids really close together, and maybe that wasn't quite in the plans, or, maybe we have kids further apart than we want, or it took a really long time to have kids, or we got pregnant and then we lost that baby. And I think the longer I go in this journey of using NFP and my fertility, the more I realize like how little of that I can actually control. And that's tough. There's a lot of things that we can't control. And I think this quote, do not be afraid when love requires sacrifice, that sacrifice of control, which was really kind of an illusion anyway, it can cause some fear. And so I did write in here because I wanted to make sure that I was keeping it real. I wrote in here, at this point in writing my talk, one of my children has a bathroom accident, and I get distracted by checking Facebook Marketplace under the guise of checking my email. So, don't know if that resonates with anyone, but that's where I'm at. So motherhood, like really, it's an experience of like letting go. It's letting go of control. It's letting go of our children. My husband, a few years ago, like was reflecting on this, and he was like, I feel bad for moms. And I was like, oh, tell me more. And he was like, yeah, right. I wasn't even pregnant at the time. He was like, tell me more. But he was like, he made this like very good point that he was like, you start with your baby like as close to you as they can physically be. Like if you're a biological mom, like you start with your baby inside your body, and the rest of your life is them like gradually like moving away from you little by little. And I was like, okay, thanks. Like, but it really is, it's a sacrifice of control. It's a sacrifice of letting go. And I think that for most of us, well, maybe not for everybody, but for me, I tend to be fearful when I perceive a sacrifice that's being requested of me, because I know how small I am, how weak I am, how sinful I am, and how inadequate I am for the task that I've been given. And it's easy for me to become resentful and bitter and self-absorbed when I focus on the sacrifice and when I become afraid of the sacrifice. So I don't think this isn't like a call to be like, oh, everything's fine all the time, and I love waking up at 3 a.m., and I wish I could wake up every 45 minutes instead of every hour and a half. That'd be so great, because then I'd be even more holy. Like, I don't think there's a call to be like fakey about it, right? But I do think that there's something very true and very, very important to wrestle with in that idea of do not be afraid when love requires sacrifice. Okay, so a few things that I have found that I think can help us with this. And I'm saying this as much to myself as to everyone else. And sometimes I hate it when speakers say that, because I'm like, no, you're not. You're standing up there, whatever. But hopefully that you all know that my kids pee themselves and I check Facebook Marketplace and started working on talks will help. Okay, so the three things that I propose as remedies for both of these situations, right? The holding intention of the weeds and the wheat, and then also being afraid when love requires sacrifice. The first one is gratitude. And Father Holdren told me when I was in college that gratitude is our most powerful weapon against the devil. And that's something that I have returned to over and over and over again in the many years since college. And I really think that that's true. And when I was in college, one of the things that he had me do was start writing a list of 10 things that I was grateful for every single day. I have a predisposition to anxiety. I'm a pretty anxious person in general. And he told me that it's easy for our brains to snowball, right? So you start being like, oh, I'm anxious about this thing, and oh no, this thing, and blah, blah, blah. And he was like, well, you could just like turn that snowball to like a snowball of gratitude. And so I started doing it when I was in college, and I think it has the opportunity to be really transformational. So what I do is when I'm having a really grumpy day where I'm just mad at everybody and nothing is working, I make a list of 10, like I write out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then I don't let myself go on to the next thing until I have filled out 10 specific things that I'm grateful for. So they can't just be like my house or like people, right? It has to be like, it's like, how was school? Good. It doesn't work like that. It has to be specific things. They don't have to be big things. They don't have to be like monumental things, but like, I'm grateful for the daffodils that are blooming in my front yard. I'm grateful that I have a dishwasher so I don't have to do all my dishes by hand. I'm grateful for, my husband texting me during the day or something like that. And I think that this practice, it helps us to be grateful. It helps us to see how God provides for us, and it also helps us to trust that God will continue to provide for us. So I'm in a Bible study, and we meet every other week. It's moms in the same sort of phase of life that I'm in. And we were talking about, we just do Lectio Divina about the upcoming week's gospel because we all have kids, and so a lot of times none of us hear the gospel during Sunday Mass anyway. Sorry, Father Holdren, that's just real life for the people in the pews. Your homilies are great, though. And we were talking about the lepers, and how the one leper came back and told Jesus, thank you. And I was sharing with the group like this practice of the 10 things of gratitude. And we talked about it, and then, Bible study was over and we all moved on. And that was like a month ago. And so we had Bible study again this last week, and we were talking about Zacchaeus, because that was the gospel for tomorrow, is Zacchaeus in the tree. And one of the girls in the Bible study was like, I just wanted to tell you that I've been doing that list of 10 gratitude thing, and it has been like really life-changing. And I was like, really? Because I had forgotten that we had talked about it, right? And she was like, I feel like it has been so good for me to see how God has answered my prayers. And there have been so many things that I remember just begging God for. And until I started doing this gratitude list, I wasn't remembering to tell him thank you for these things. And so she was just kind of sharing with the group that this practice had been really, really transformational for you, or for her, not for you. I mean, it might be for you too. I don't presume to say that about you. Okay. So the second thing is seeking God in prayer. And I'm going to, again, refer to this Bible study. We were talking about Zacchaeus this week, and several of us noticed how there's, in this story of Zacchaeus, the beginning of the story talks about Zacchaeus seeking Jesus. And the end of the story talks about Jesus. Jesus says, I came to seek and to save what was lost. So when you hear it tomorrow, pay attention to those two little seek things, and then you can think back to this, and you'll be like, oh, I feel like somebody was just talking about this. Which is what happens to me in Bible study all the time. I'm like, I feel like I just heard this story a little bit ago. I'm like, oh yeah, we had Bible study this week. And so I think that there's a beauty in this, because Zacchaeus thinks that he is seeking the Lord, and then the Lord says, I came to seek and to save what was lost. And there's a mutual seeking, but really, Jesus is the one doing the heavy lifting. And so I just would encourage you all to make time for prayer. I know that it's hard. I know that life is busy. But it's so necessary to just spend some time with Jesus in prayer every day. And Some people say like 5 minutes a day, 10 minutes a day, whatever. Jacques Philippe, who is a Catholic art author that I really like, he said that we give 5 minutes a day to things that we don't like doing. And so I would encourage you, if at all possible, to take more than 5 minutes of prayer in your day and to just spend a little bit of time with Jesus, reading maybe the gospel for the day, listening to praise and worship music, praying the rosary, whatever it is that can like really lift your heart to the Lord. To just make that a priority in your life and make time for it. And the third thing that I have found that has been very helpful for me in relieving the fears of sacrifice and also to be able to hold the good and the bad intention without losing my mind is staying within a community and building a community. We need each other. That's part of the reason that this retreat exists. And when you split into your groups, we've split you into groups by parish or by location. And the reason for that is that hope that you would meet other people in your area, meet other people in your parish, meet other people that maybe you haven't met at your church before, and that you would get to know each other in hopes that we can continue to build community. I really think that community is absolutely critical to function as a mom. And I just don't, it like blows my mind that people do this by themselves. And I think like no matter how awesome your spouse is, like I have a very awesome spouse, but like there are still times when I'm like, I just need to talk to another mom about this. Like you don't understand because you're not a mom, and that's great. And I still love you, but like there are things that I need from other women that my husband can't provide. And I also know that I live in Lincoln, and some of you are from like real small towns, and I get that, so please don't hear this as a critique, but I think just this idea of community is very close to my heart. I think bringing people food. I just was sort of like reflecting on like the different times that I really felt loved and appreciated by my community. The most recent was when we had our miscarriage in April. A friend of mine who has older children, she was like, what can I do? I was like, I don't know. I don't even know what I need. She was like, okay, well, I'm going to set up a meal train for you. And when you have doctor's appointments, you can let me know and I will watch your kid for you. And it was just like so beautiful to me to see like that how many people, come together when there's a crisis, when there's a serious situation like that. I just brought some meals to a friend, acquaintance really, whose daughter is having a really major surgery. And they live like a little bit out of Lincoln. And she was like, thank you so much. We've never had anyone bring us a meal before. And it just was like, it broke my heart because I was like, that's like a failure of like the church, meaning us as the church, right? That like this woman, she's had 2 kids. They're from out of town. They don't have family around. But like, we can reach out to people. Like women are good at that. We're good at like seeing a need and being like walking with somebody. I think that that's a really beautiful thing about women. And then I was even thinking back to like when I had my very first baby, Sophia, I was always so stressed out. I don't know if that's probably somewhat universal, but I was maybe more of a nutcase than most. But I remember like I was texting pictures of poopy diapers to my aunt who's a nurse. I'm like, does this look normal? Do you think she has a dairy allergy? She's like, yeah, that's fine. And I'm like, I don't know if I've ever told her thank you. I probably should like buy her a present or something. It's like a thank you for looking at my baby's poopy diaper pictures. But I do think like there's something that women, we do, like we're able to hear other women, we're able to listen, we're able to engage in their story. And I think that I really like praying the Stations of the Cross for that, with that in mind, because there's 14 Stations of the Cross, right? And the Stations of the Cross where Jesus is being helped willingly, it's all women. It's Veronica wiping the face of Jesus. It's Jesus meeting his mother and her like consoling him. And then the weeping women of Jerusalem. Like you've got Simon of Cyrene helping Jesus carry his cross, but he's kind of like conscripted into doing it. But like the people that help Jesus carry his cross willingly are women. And I think that there is something very true about that in my experience, that women have been women, other moms, not even necessarily other moms, but like women, we have this capacity, this gift for hearing other people, for being with them in the hard times, and for helping them to carry their burdens and their crosses. So maybe another point for reflection. So again, those 3 remedies: gratitude, seeking God in prayer, and then community.